where you were and what you thought was going on?
Well, there were suspicions that the United States was determined to go to war against Saddam Hussein, whatever the circumstances. And this memorandum, if its contents are true, serves to support these suspicions. What is extraordinary is that the President of the United States should be talking about trying to provoke Saddam Hussein into some kind of action so as to give a justification, talking about assassination, talking about essentially deceiving Saddam Hussein, a defector to be brought out to give a statement. All of that suggests a degree of desperation, which I think is reflected in Gary Gibbons' report.
Do you think that desperation was mirrored by events? I mean, did you sense that desperation at the time?
Well, if you remember, immediately after this, there was the period when efforts were being made to obtain a second resolution at the United Nations. It now appears that these efforts were, in a sense, irrelevant, because even if they'd been unsuccessful, as indeed they were, military action was to follow, and that is indeed what happened. It also appears that the Prime Minister's support for George W. Bush was unconditional. He said he wanted a second resolution for the purpose, I think he said, of providing cover and dealing with Arab states. But he said he was solidly behind the President at that stage. Now, none of that was being communicated to the House of Commons, and in particular, none of it was communicated to the House of Commons in the debate of the 17th and 18th of March.
But you could argue that the Prime Minister comes out of this quite well, because he does at least argue for a second resolution.
He argues for a second resolution, but he does so on the basis that if one is not obtained, there will still be military action, and he'll go along with it.
Isn't the most serious challenge from this conversation that they kind of knew, before we did, that there was absolutely no evidence against Saddam Hussein at that moment, and yet people like Colin Powell, people like, even the Prime Minister himself, were still talking about 45 minutes and all the rest of it.
Weapons of mass destruction. You're absolutely right. That conversation suggested that they knew and had accepted that they weren't going to get WMD evidence that was going to support the argument that Saddam Hussein was in breach. And there's another date which we haven't mentioned so far. That's on the 5th of February, Colin Powell went to the Security Council of the United Nations and he delivered that extraordinary attack, as it were, on Saddam Hussein, based on intelligence, an event which he's since described as being the most uncomfortable occasion in his life.
Sir Mingus Campbell, thank you very much indeed for coming in. And for obvious reasons, we were not able to approach the government before we went to air, but we're hopeful that they may produce somebody in the course of this programme. And we'll have a full background to that exclusive story, the timetable of the road to the Iraq War, transcripts of key events, and a profile of the author of Lawless World, Philippe Sands, on our website. Log on to channel4.com/news.